Hello and welcome to Living Healthy and Happily Ever After, a webinar series with Dr. Susan Lawton and Rebecca Hinsey. We welcome you to our first program in the series, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, something Dr. Sue and I are very passionate about. Let me just give you a little information about Dr. Lawton and myself. Dr. Lawton is a clinical psychologist and biochemist, and she has had more than 40 years of experience working with essential oils. You'll find us talking a lot about essential oils as we go through our series. Dr. Lawton is also a registered nurse, so she's had plenty of time to work in practice. She's been instrumental in helping I don't know how many thousands of people, Sue. You've been absolutely a remarkable gift to the earth to be here to share your gifts and talents with so many. And myself, I'm Rebecca Hinsey. I've worked in family issues for over 20 years now. I have written a book called Healing Your Family History, which has become a footprint for many therapy programs in working to heal destructive family patterns. That book is still in print, sold through Hay House, and available online at Amazon.com. Well, just a little bit about us. We came together to put together the pages of a book that we feel very passionate about, Living Healthy and Happily Ever After. Some don't believe in the dream, and we actually do, that you can live healthy and happy and have good relationships if you choose to do so, and this is the premise of our book. And as we start our mental health series, we're going to be talking first today about how you can change your thoughts and in return to actually change your lives. So welcome, Dr. Sue. I know you're there with us from New Jersey.
Hi there, from New Jersey, it's Dr. Sue. And I can't tell you how fun this has been to put the book together and to work together. We do seminars together for people live, and what happens with the principles of the book and the oils is amazing. We have people across the country who are now using the book as an 8-week series where they're having people get together to learn how to use the blends and learn how to do affirmations. So we're just going to give you chapter 1 today, just a little preview.
And as we get into chapter 1, I'm actually going to read to you a quote from a very well-known book many of you have come across probably already in your lifetime. If not, you should pick it up. It's called As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. He has a very remarkable statement in here where he says, man is made or unmade by himself. In the armory of thought, he forges the weapons by which he destroys himself. Think about that for just a second, that we actually have the power to destroy ourselves within the mind. So just think on that for just a second, because we actually want to talk about how we're going to destroy ourselves, but rather how we are going to heal ourselves with our mind. And that is why we're bringing up the topic today, changing your thoughts, changing your life. You'll see at the bottom of your screen right now a little reference to wild orange and frankincense. And you'll watch us as we go through talk about essential oils and how they are instrumental in helping us to change our thoughts and change our life. But that doesn't take away our individual responsibility to seek out and change the way we look at things. So, Sue, let's talk for a second about wild orange and frankincense and why those two oils and how they might actually be useful. And actually, probably if you're at home and you have wild orange and frankincense, now might be a good time to pull it out and use it, because they're powerful at helping us change our thoughts and change our life. How?
Well, number one, the wild orange and the frankincense combination, when you put it on your wrists, rub it together and then inhale it, or you put it in the palms of your hands, rub your hands together, make them warm and inhale it, and then kind of just dust off your head. We instruct people to think in terms of coming into the total present moment. Because if you're concerned about yesterday or you're worried about the dentist appointment later today, you're missing something that your heart might be telling you. And frankincense and wild orange are both excellent for your heart, your innermost person. It allows the flow to your brain, which is really your baby part, and your brain can then respond with a new consciousness, with a sense of trusting your heart. That's why I love wild orange and frankincense. It totally brings me into present moment. And that's all we have to be concerned about right now is what you're thinking right at this moment.
Well, and as I'm reading through further into James Allen's book, he says, we also fashion the tools with which we can build ourselves heavenly mansions of joy and peace. And frankincense and wild orange are supportive of that process. Well, let's dig into our material today and take a look at all of the different ways that we can change our life. First of all, we decide what the book of our life is going to be. We have power of choice and agency. It's an innate gift that's been given to us to be able to choose the way we respond in life. Dr. Stephen Covey wrote the foreword to Healing Your Family History, the book that I mentioned earlier that I wrote and published in 2006. And he tells a story in the front end of the book in the forward section where he was on sabbatical in Hawaii, and he was in a very reflective state, and he went through the stacks of books in the library and actually pulled a book off the shelf, and he turned right to a page, and he eyed 3 sentences. I don't know if any of you have ever had that kind of experience before where the thing that you need to read is right in front of you, and he had that moment when he opened up the book, and his eyes went right to these 3 sentences, and they said, between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space lies our freedom and our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. Well, he took time to reflect on those sentences again and again, and he said he could hardly think of anything else for a period of time. He said he went back and forth over that and thought of our genetic makeup, how we have a tendency to think certain ways based off of our family experience. Many often believe that we're sort of stuck in our genetic makeup. We can't get out of things, and he thought of that, and he thought of the freedom that actually comes from those sentences. Again, it says, between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space lies our freedom and our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. Now, I think of it, my dog, Jack, he's a chocolate lab. He's a great dog. We've had him for a long time. We think he's the best dog on earth. I know many of you may think that about your pets. But our family loves Jack. He's a very obedient, good dog. But he doesn't have the, he does, if I let him out to go to the bathroom, he thinks he's going to get a treat if he comes right back in. I give him the treat. His response and the stimulus before him are consistent. He doesn't have the agency to necessarily choose his response. But man is different. You and I are different. All of us are different. We can choose our response. We may be programmed to behave in a certain way because of our family experience or what we've been through, but that doesn't mean we have to. Our freedom lies in the space of choice. And we can decide what we're going to do with our lives. We can be the writer of our lives. And we don't have to be depressed. We don't have to be poor. We don't have to fall into the traps of our ancestors. And we don't even have to fall into the traps of the life that we're living. Many of us are not happy with our lives in present time. I talk to a lot of those people. Sue, how about you? Do you talk with a lot of people who feel like they're unhappy in the present moment?
Yes. Their greatest problem is they can't stop playing back yesterday's pain, and then they're worried about tomorrow's pain rather than just staying in the moment, staying in between that space of stimulus and response. They're not even aware there is a space. So we often have to tell people, please take a deep breath before you respond. Sometimes no response is the best response.
Well, absolutely. And not knowing leaves us often running the programming of where we've been in the past. So unless we decide, today that we do have a choice to do things differently, then we may not know that there is any other way. So this is probably why it's the first of our slides, wouldn't you say? First, we're broadcasting the news. Guess what? You have a choice. You don't have to be unhappy, and you don't even have to be unhappy in your circumstances, and you can even choose that you want to think differently and actually change your world. So that brings us into first talking about our thoughts as chemical reactions. Some wonderful research done by Dr. Candace Pert came out, wouldn't you say, in the 1980s-ish, and then she published her book, Molecules of Emotion, and actually her research was found by many doctors, but I think she was one of the first to publish, that our thoughts actually become chemical reactions in our brain. Sue, as a chemist, do you want to talk about that process?
Well, if you think in terms of each cell has a slate on it, and the slate starts out blank when it springs forward from inside your bones where you make your new cells. When you get to your spleen and your liver, they get to tag the cells and say, hey, you're specialized, go be a heart cell. You're specialized, go be a brain cell. what's imprinted on there is the area that it needs to go work and operate, and that's done with the TH, and the IN can be done when it gets to the site, and then it duplicates whatever cell it replaced. So if you have a cell in your brain that has a picture of a flat tire, and you're worried about a flat tire, then you're broadcasting flat tire. The potassium has the ability to change that. When you can say, I'm expecting an open door and safe trip when I get into my car. And when you say, I'm expecting an open door and a safe trip, and you mean it, all thoughts of a flat tire disappear. When you are worried about something, or you're anticipating, gee, I had this happen before and it wasn't a good turnout, your chemicals within your body will race around to create the same response. Unless you take a deep breath and you choose to think optimistically, or you make a plan for a different day.
So sometimes that's easier said than done, because sometimes we have our chemistry out of whack, and maybe our neurotransmitters are unbalanced, and we just wake up feeling very depressed. And sometimes I know I've heard people say, especially when you're suffering from clinical depression and you do have your neurochemistry all out of balance, to have somebody walk up to you and say, well, just think positively, can be one of the most irritating things that can be said. So what's your response to that, Dr. Lawton? Because I know that you've probably run into that too, and there is an answer, isn't there?
Well, for each person it's a different answer, and if someone is really clinically depressed and they're working with a qualified physician, they're hopefully taught coping skills so they can manage their feelings and their thoughts. Whenever I get a new patient that has a description of clinical depression, the first thing I do is take them for a walk. I literally say, we're going to go over to this park, which is across the street from my office, and we're just going to take a little walk and we're going to breathe. Are you okay with that? And actually most people, because a psychologist's office can be very intimidating. People are worried about judgment. People are worried about I did something wrong. They give me far more power than I ever had. So taking a walk together just around a little park area, asking them to breathe, we're helping them manage them. It's a simple thing. And there are many steps we can take to help people cope with whatever tragedy has befallen them. But we empower them. And the oils are an amazing helper on so many levels. But first, we help people make choices. And I know when you've worked with people, Rebecca, you've helped them make long-term choices and long-term plans. I'm really big on let's take a calendar. Next week, let's plan what 2 days you're going to have specific new kinds of fun. I don't care if you're renting a new video. I don't care if you're going to go buy a parakeet. It's your fun. You have to plan it. You have the power. You have to execute.
I think it's important to remember that if you do what you always did, you get what you always got. So unless there is that agency exercised and that choice taken to change the circumstances and change it up, and maybe it is just with a brisk walk like you talked about. I've actually heard people say that a brisk walk can actually be more effective than even some anti-anxiety medications for releasing anxiety or relieving the symptoms of anxiety. And we certainly have essential oils that do that as well, so imagine combining essential oils with a brisk walk. That's one of the reasons why I love essential oils and I love doTERRA's, and we, on this broadcast, will just let you know that we believe that doTERRA's essential oils are the very best and the most pure, and they have the most potency for working with mental health. And love, love, love what they do to help in this chemical reaction process. So let's move on for just a second and talk about how essential oils can actually alter or change the cell, because they actually do that, and that's why we like them so much. Some of you may be familiar with Vanderbilt's study where they actually showed that citrus oils help to reduce anxiety and stress among their patients and even their workers in their emergency room, in one of the busiest emergency rooms in the United States. Now, having worked with family issues, I wanted to stand on the rooftops and scream out to everyone, can you believe that's the case, that essential oils just diffused in the air and aromatically inhaled can reduce stress? What kind of news, if that works in a hospital, what kind of news can that be for a mother and a father at home, a father at work or a mother at work undergoing stress, or parents at home dealing with children or children when they're coming home from a stressful day at school? If we can relieve stress aromatically with essential oils, what can we do for family relationships? What can we do to help build self-esteem? It's exciting, and it leaves us not feeling powerless. So I know that these essential oils actually clear receptor sites. They help our chemistry. Dr. Lawton, do you want to describe a little bit of that process from a chemistry standpoint?
Well, sure. Actually, you already said it. They clear the receptor sites. That's the first thing that all essential oils do for our body. If you put them on the bottom of your feet, if you inhale them just coming in the house where there's a nice diffuser going, whenever you get some of those molecules, remember, one drop of an essential oil that is the pure efficacy of the CPTG that doTERRA produces and distributes, it's up to 400 million molecules. And each molecule has its own independent job. The constituents stay whole that are part of the original drop, because the chemistry is perfect. It's Mother Nature. And when it runs through your system, its job is to seek out and eliminate foreign or debris, foreign materials, debris, bacteria, anything that isn't specialized function that belongs within your body chemistry. If it's foreign to your body chemistry, the oils immediately throw themselves right on top of it, cover it up, eliminate it, reduce it to dust. They kill bacteria that's not healthy for us. They clear receptor sites. And why that's so very important is, let's use the example of the thyroid and the parathyroid. Thyroid and parathyroid each produce something called T3 and T4. These are very important mechanisms. When they're released into your system, one is supposed to match up with natural process called testosterone, and the other one is supposed to match up with one of your major amino acid functions. And if they go to those receptor sites and they're blocked, it starts a long process of what we call a hormone imbalance. So when people complain, I have a thyroid issue, maybe it's not necessarily a thyroid issue, because you could very well be making everything you need in your organs, but your cell receptor sites could be blocked. That's why we love essential oils, because whatever the priority of function is chemically within your body, the oils know what to do. They're smart oils. They don't have smartphones, but you would think so, as quick as they move through your chemistry to enhance your life. And the simplest way to explain it is, if your cell receptor sites are blocked, you're only getting 30% of the oxygen you need. Try thinking in terms of, you could only take 1/3 of the air in you normally take. What do you think is going to happen to those cells? If you can't process the food in and the old waste materials out, everything becomes congested, everything becomes sluggish, you don't feel good, you're irritable, you don't expect a positive outcome. But when you use essential oils and you rewrite on that clear slate, I can do it, amazing things happen. You draw amazing people to you, you draw amazing situations to you. We've all lived it and we've seen it. We've seen it both ways, haven't we?
Well, we have, and this is what, when I mentioned earlier, being chemically out of balance, when you have somebody who's depressed and feeling really down and it's a chemical depression, they may feel like, I've used this analogy before, like they're maybe they're an Olympic swimmer, but they're swimming and they have gotten stuck under a bar in the ocean, and someone's screaming off the deck, well, just swim, and they feel stuck. There's a bar over them. They can't get up, and yet they may be an Olympic swimmer. That some may feel that way when it comes to positive thinking, that maybe they know, maybe they've read a lot of self-help books. Maybe they know they should be thinking positively. Maybe they've tried affirmations before, but they are stuck with a chemical imbalance. Now look what essential oils can do for that. coming in and clearing these receptor sites can actually support, along with your positive thinking, the changes of your chemistry. And so this is so supportive to working with affirmations and working with positive thoughts. So they run hand in hand, which is why we bring them up together. We literally, with essential oils, can lose the idea that we're powerless, and we can gain the knowledge and truth, which is that we can do it. We can create a happy and healthy life. It's just great news. So let's talk for a little bit about cells and belief, and know that your cells actually do believe what you tell them. So speaking out loud affirmations is very, very significant. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But we actually see where cells will respond to what we think or what we believe about our reality. So now that we're coming into the fall season, you probably heard a lot of people say, well, my kids get sick when it's time to go back to school. My kids always get sick. And maybe blame it on the idea of germs being swapped at school, or when the seasons change. A lot of belief in seasonal allergies, like it's October, so I'll get another sinus infection. Or thinking of Christmas time. A lot of people get sick at Christmas time and blame that on the season. And yet that can have as much to do with emotional factors as anything. I know Dr. Sue and I were talking about my kids. Sometimes my children will get overwhelmed at school and need a mental health day, and often that manifests itself in an illness or sickness, not maybe so much because they need to be sick, but maybe they don't know another way to get out of their busy schedule and have a mental health day. Many people and many family patterns will suggest that people need to get sick to have a break, or need to get sick to get attention or even love, and that's kind of walking away into belief systems. But just know that our cells do respond to what we tell them and to what we believe. Now, I know you've worked in practice with this, Dr. Lawton, and have seen this as well.
Yes, as soon as I hear somebody verbalize, oh, it's October, I always get a terrible sinus infection. If they say it near me, I'll look at them and say, well, you don't have to. And there's other people who will be silly about the holidays. Every Thanksgiving, I get terrible indigestion. Maybe you should examine how you eat. You don't have to repeat these patterns. It's really, really important, because as soon as you say it, your cells believe it, and they go, yep, it's October. Okay, let's motivate. Let's get that sinus dripping. Let's get that back of the throat clogging. They will cooperate. Think in terms of something as simple as lift your left arm. You tell your cells to lift your left arm, they'll do it. They'll move, 20 pounds very quickly, because your arm is heavy if you're not really strong with your muscles inside. So your individual cells will respond. And so if you decide you want a sinus infection, you're going to have one. If getting on a plane, if every time you get on a plane you say, oh, my ears always suffer so much on a plane, then next time you get on a plane, they will. They're going to cooperate with you. Rather than use oils and say, I'm going to make sure I avoid orange juice and I avoid dairy during transitional changes in the weather, and maybe my stomach won't be out of whack, and maybe I won't get a sinus infection. Or you can tell a whole different story about this fall, I'm going to use my nutrition and my oils, and I'm going to stay healthy. I'm going to have plenty of energy, and I'm going to be well. And so use your oils. Make the statement of, I am healthy. I feel good.
Well, let's talk for just a second about even more serious disease, if you don't mind, like cancer and diabetes and some of these other very serious illnesses, and how even family patterns of these diseases we can get into the idea that we're going to have them because our grandmother had them. When we're working with breaking free of destructive family patterns, some of these are health patterns. Maybe it's addiction or whatever. Just because our ancestors had them doesn't mean that we have to have them too. And when we get stuck in the idea that, oh, my grandmother had cancer, so I will have it as well, can leave us very sad and discouraged, and actually contributing to the problem instead of working to heal it. We know in the study of epigenetics that there's actually more value placed upon our lifestyle than there is upon our genetics when it comes to disease. So by changing our lifestyle, and that's what we're asking you to do in this series of webinars to help you to live healthy and happily ever after, we're asking you to change some things first, and that's why it's chapter number 1. We're asking you to change your thoughts. We're asking you to change the way you look at things. And then as we go on the series, you'll see that we'll ask you to do some other things, including exercise and dietary changes and things like that that are also necessary to living a healthy and happy life. Well, let's move along and talk about one of my favorite subjects, the daily news. And I'll tell you why it's one of my favorites. I actually did my undergraduate degree in broadcast news, and I worked in television news for a while back in the 1980s. Loved it. It was a great field for me. I wasn't married at the time, and it was a wonderful wonderful experience that I had. And one of the things, let me just give you a little bit of a history of what, or some knowledge of what goes on in a newsroom. You know, everybody's busy in a newsroom looking to see what's going on in the world so that they can be the first to tell the story of what's happening. And there's a lot of watching of other stations of CNN and watching the Associated Press, and nowadays, they didn't back in my day, but they do now watch the internet very, very closely and see what's being tweeted and, you know, what's going on in the airwaves, and then people are grabbing their stories and creating their news and writing their articles, and every news station wants to be the very first to tell the news and get on the air first and tell the stories of what's going on so that people will want to watch their news station first. And then that actually goes into even more, you know, it tells if you're the more watched television news station, then you sell more advertising dollars, and that's sort of the industry of television news. Well, one of the things I loved about television news that really worked for me is I could go into the newsroom and every day was a new day. Every day was different. I would go in, there would be a story, we would report on it. At the end of the day, after we would get off the air, we would take our scripts from our teleprompter scripts and we would just dump them right in the trash. We didn't even keep them. Because the very next morning when we arrived, the newscast for the morning would be an entirely different newscast with entirely new information. And sometimes we would talk about the same things, you know, for days on end. Like right now, you might notice that the election coverage is definitely going to be the highlight of our newscast. But that can change drastically. Like, for instance, if we were to have a terrorist attack hit somewhere, then that one might overtake the election, and we might start talking about that story for a while, and the election could even drop back off. And so the news is very volatile. Some days you wake up and there's something totally new going on. We've likened the daily news to our cells in our body, and this is actually a very similar process. Our cells actually record information based off of what's going on. Now, we may be running our old news. Maybe it's the old stories of our life, and that's what runs the headline every day. And if that's the case, our brain actually creates neural pathways where we just sort of send that same information over and over again. You know, I'm mad at so-and-so. I can't forgive so-and-so. This happened to me when I was a child. And this is why sometimes talk therapy, when we're working in talk therapy and going over and over and over again, an abuse situation or trauma from the past can actually be unhealthy. That can be very healthy to talk things through and heal things, but when we just keep repeating the bad news over and over again, it's like seeing the same newspaper over and over again. That can be damaging on ourselves. When we give new news or new information to our cells can actually shift. And I'd love for you, Dr. Lawton, to kind of talk about that process of how our cells take in that new information and actually write a new script, just like writing the new news.
Well, if we have a choice about what to dwell on, and we're predisposed to dwell on previous pain, previous slights, as you were just describing, then our whole body chemistry becomes what we call acidic. Because when we work internally in an unhealthy way, the cells don't rise to support good health. They encourage you by allowing candida to manifest. If you have anything with sugar in it, if you're playing back old hurts, the body views that as stress, and stress creates acid. And then you want to comfort yourself, and so you add in maybe some dietary choices that aren't in your best interest. I know myself, I have personally experienced major shift from eating lots of carbs to eating lots of vegetables and fruit, and I have a lot more energy. and I have a lot more hours of high energy than I had previously when I had eaten a whole lot of carbs all day long. I've always been one who tended to think positive thoughts, so I would get through with my head most days. But a lot of people who have experienced pain, disappointment, rejection, it's difficult to make that shift, and that's again where our friends, the oils, come in, because everybody will tell me they have a friend in their life who loves chaos. They have a problem, then they have to call everybody and do a survey, and what happens is the problem becomes the ticket to getting attention. Resolution of the problem doesn't necessarily get rewarded, but you get a lot of attention and a lot of advice if you tell the daily news of, oh, this week I had another flat tire, this week I had a bill that was unexpected because I didn't know that the water was leaking in the backyard. All of these things become your job to fix. If you have somebody in your life that you allow to call you and say, please help me, please help me. The problem is if it just changes the name of the character, that's the problem, but they don't really seem to manage, perhaps they're not really taking care of business. And if you spend a lot of time trying to help these people, you're enabling their choice of staying in chaos. You have to save yourself. So in terms of using oils and chemically, you have the power to keep your body in an alkaline state. You have the power with good eating choices to keep your body in an alkaline state. There's publications all over the world that talk about alkalinity is a wonderful place where serious bacteria and cancer cannot grow. It cannot thrive. So we really would like to give you many different ways to look at your positive aspects and tell a different story. You have that choice. You can be rapidly recovering from a diagnosis. You can be rapidly getting your bedroom organized, getting your closets organized. You can tell the story of the fun things you found while you were cleaning things out. There's an infinite number of ways to restate the news of your life. And I do love the fact that you got to throw away your news sheets at the end of the day, because that's kind of what our cells do. The cells that we're done with, they move on out. As long as we give them enough hydration, they will move on out. And this new DDR that's been released by the company is amazing for helping cells that were only halfway dead to get on out, to move away, to stop collecting friends that could be a serious congestion and disease issue. Take the DDR daily. Stay clean inside. Even when you're going through transition, you may have a few days of thinking bad thoughts.
And if you are finding that your daily news is the same old story of depression or victimness, or you've got a villain in your story and you can't let go of what's happened, then you need to look at why you want to hang on to that. Because with all of these things and what we're telling you that's so exciting is there's a chemistry behind this process, and it's real, and oils do work, and nutritionals do work, and supporting yourself does work, and you can throw those sheets away, and that's the reality. So if you continue to show up with the same daily news, then you have to say, what's the payoff for me? Why am I keeping this? Why am I holding on? Sometimes, you know, the devil we know is better than the devil we don't know. Have you ever heard that saying?
Yes, unfortunately, I've heard that a lot.
Yeah, and then you have to ask yourself, do I really like my miserable story? Because sometimes a part of us does, and if we're holding on after all of this, then definitely there's a part of us that wants to keep it for a reason, and uncovering that is very, very helpful. And I know there are essential oils that actually help with that process too, and help us to go ahead and make a new choice. Now, we've just changed our slide, and you can look at that. How do I choose? Awareness is always more than half the battle, and that's what we're talking about here when we're talking about uncovering why perhaps our daily news does not change. We want to have an awareness of the thoughts, awareness of why we hold on, and be willing to let go. Again, awareness is more than half the battle. A good thing to do is to just sit, and if you were to imagine the thoughts in your mind and get really in touch with them, and imagine what your news story looks like. What does the daily news look like inside your mind? Do you have positive or negative thoughts? Ask yourself that. Figure out, go through the awareness process and then look at how you're going to choose the positive and embrace and accept something that is completely new. And let's talk about the fact that it might feel funny. So why don't you talk about that? Because I know you put such humor to letting go sometimes. How might 50 make it be funny?
Right. I know, but it's really hard because out of our own mouths, we will hear our determination to hang on to the negative. How many times have you heard yourself retelling a story of something that happened that day? And while you're telling the story, you're going like, oh, I was fine until Chris called. I was fine until Robert called. I was fine until, Patricia called from the office and told me about this big screw up, blah, 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 blah. Well, did it get resolved? Well, sure, but you should have heard this. If you get hung up on one action, even past the time it's resolved, like you said a minute ago, you got to figure out, why are we hanging on to that aspect? Why did we allow that phone call about somebody's credit card not going through really upset us? Because nobody did anything on purpose to you. That's why we're saying choose the positive, and it is going to feel funny. New feelings feel funny. When you help people into the Vitality Pack, you help people into the oils, they're going to say, gee, I feel strange. And you go, yeah, but it's good strange, right? Why feel funny? Yeah, but it's good funny, right? And they go, yes. So they have to embrace the shift because, yes, it's going to feel different. If someone lived in a household that everybody barked at each other rather than say things in a positive, kind way to get the same effect, go back and make your bed. There's no dinner till you make your bed, or whatever the line was. People don't know how to speak kindly, but you can make a different choice. And yes, it's going to feel weird. Instead of barking, it definitely is going to feel weird. For accepting and embracing new, because you don't know what's going to happen, think of it as an adventure. If you're making a conscious effort to be positive, it's an adventure. It's going to feel new. It's going to feel different. Say something outlandish. When somebody says something that you hear is critical, change the subject. Make it something so surprising like, did you know that if I put 2 drops of peppermint in the brownie recipe, it's really very minty? It takes 2 to fight. If somebody doesn't, respond or oppose, there's no fight.
Well, and you can always leave, right? You can always get yourself out of a negative circumstance by, 1, not putting yourself there in the first place, and 2, just making a choice with who you hang around with. We talked about this on the phone earlier this morning. One of the things I feel passionate about is teaching people that not only do they need to change their thoughts, but they need to change who they hang around with.
Absolutely.
If you put yourself with people who are like-minded, positive thinkers, now let's talk about like-minded. If you put yourself with like-minded, depressed people, or like-minded, positive thinkers, your daily news is going to be tweaked in one or either of the directions based upon your choice, again, of what you do with your time. A lot can be avoided, a lot of negativity in our life, by planning, proper planning. For instance, we talked about taking the brisk walk, taking the time ahead of time to use your oils. I know when I tend to get frustrated or maybe feel like I'm going to lose it with something or someone, probably someone, is if I'm tired and I'm worn out, if I haven't had enough sleep, if I haven't had enough of a break, if I'm not very balanced. And I know many mothers may feel the same way, but am I any different than a 2-year-old who doesn't get a nap and doesn't get to eat, So we have to plan to deal with our humanness and make arrangements to take care of ourselves well so that we can choose the positive. It puts us in a better place. Now, you gave 3 oils down at the bottom of the page that are great for part of this planning process. So will you share with us the Roman chamomile, lime, and geranium, the whys and hows?
Yes. Roman chamomile is like a Panzer Division tank. It goes in, it identifies cells and feelings that are tipped to the dark side, and it slaps them. It just slaps them and just says, oh, knock it off. Lime is amazing because it slices through old gristle. Gristle is, well, I can't hang out with that person because they're always trying to steal from me. Gristle is, well, I can't talk to that person on the committee because they always have to be right. Lime cancels, I have to be right. Geranium takes old pain, old scenarios, and it shakes them up, rearranges the scenario so that your mind is more accepting of maybe it wasn't quite that bad. Geranium allows things to take pain to take its proper place. So when you combine Roman chamomile, lime, and geranium, you are empowered with the choice. You get to be in that space between, what was it, Mr. Covey said? In that space between stimulus and response.
Stimulus and response, yes.
You get to have your freedom between stimulus and response. You don't have to respond. When you see that name come up on your cell phone, and the last time you spoke to them when you got off the phone, they felt great and you felt depressed, what do you think? Give it a rest. You don't have to fix them and then you feel drained and bad. Break those habits. Being a hero was really nice, but at the expense of your family?
Well, not so much. And taking care of ourselves and being true to ourselves is an important part of that process. Really loving who we are and believing that we deserve to be happy and healthy is probably at the bottom of all this. So let's talk for a minute about our conscious and subconscious, because that sort of taps into that. We discussed this on our webinar that we did last week on emotion and depression. If any of you were there, you might have seen the slide that we have here on the IQ and the EQ. The IQ is what goes on in our conscious mind, it's our intelligence, our factor of intelligence. Our EQ is our emotional quotient, or understanding what goes on inside of ourselves emotionally, even at a deeper level of consciousness. So if you look at that slide, you'll see just a little bit of the iceberg on top, and I'm sure it looks huge if you're sailing on the ocean and look at it from a distance, but you hardly even grasp the depth of how beautiful and large this is when you look beneath the surface and see all that's underneath an iceberg. And this is very representative of our conscious and subconscious mind. We do have conscious thoughts that we're aware of if we pay attention. We also have subconscious thoughts that just sort of happen, whether we want them to or not. They just sort of show up. And oftentimes our negative or destructive feedback that we get that comes from our subconscious mind comes from beliefs that are deep within ourselves that are things like, I don't deserve to be loved, or I don't deserve to be happy, or I'm not good enough, or I'm a failure, or I'm not lovable, or I'm worthless. And often those beliefs are formed in our early years. Some of them can be family patterns that get passed along. But most of the time, you know, our parents or teachers when we are young may have said things that left us feeling like we are not enough. Or maybe it wasn't something they said, but something that they did, something that came through in their nonverbal communication that led us to feel like how we were exactly as a child wasn't good enough or wasn't okay. And those beliefs actually stay with us into our lifetime and can be a big part of how we see the world, and they can actually manage and even control some of our thinking. Maybe perhaps we want certain things in our life. We want to believe we deserve to have a happy relationship or happy home and family or good health. But if deep down inside ourselves we believe we're not allowed to have it, maybe it's bad to have it, maybe we don't deserve it, maybe it's good to sacrifice our life and our health to support others, there can be all kinds of imbalanced thinking that goes on at that subconscious level. And again, coming to awareness of what goes on subconsciously inside ourselves is our first step to healing. And that's something that my book, Healing Your Family History, takes a look at. There's a 5-step process that walks you through the thinking process to break free of destructive thought patterns that can surface in the form of thought. Now, we do have some suggestions. I know Dr. Lawton has a wonderful protocol here. Do you want to share that with us, Sue?
Yeah, because the thing is that there's a huge range of happy. If you think of like 0 to 7,200 million, that's all the different stages of happy. Sometimes people will say to me, all I want is an absence of chaos. Then I will be happy. Some people want to grow family relationships where trust becomes the major factor that has gotten stronger. then they will be happy. Some people choose to be happy in the moment. There's emotional maturity, the IQ of your emotions. There's an unlimited number. What we have found when we are asking people to trust their insides, to trust their emotional levels, to trust their consciousness, we ask them to use 4 drops of frankincense, 2 drops of clary sage, and 4 drops of lime. We mix this together. You put it in the bones behind your ears. You rub it on your sternum in an upward motion to the bottom of your chin and around the core of your belly. And what you say is, I'm aware of what's going on inside of me. I release the past. I'm free to see the truth and be happy my way. Rebecca, when we talked about this, you shifted right away.
I loved it. It was a deep breath I had just even looking at this picture and being able to say out loud, I'm aware of what's going on inside of me. I release the past. I'm free to see the truth and to be happy my way. And loving and accepting ourselves is a big part of that. So you could always tack onto that if you're struggling with feelings of worthlessness to, words like, I love and accept myself exactly the way that I am. I love me. Identify, what is your patterns or whatever you identify at your subconscious level. Take a look at those and realize that just because you identify it and see it there, it doesn't have to be that big chunk of ice underneath the ocean. You can actually very easily chisel that away by using your essential oils and stating new affirmations and free up the weight of a heavy subconscious that may be laden with unhealthy thinking. I love the idea of that. I love being free to be me. And one of the things that you said to me earlier today, Dr. Lawton, is that so many times when we look at our subconscious, we see it as a negative, that there are things about ourselves that we need to change or, hurtful things from the past or whatever. But there's a lot of good things under there, too, aren't there?
Yes, people forget about their virtues. Somehow in the United States we're programmed to be under that constant microscope of criticism rather than take a minute to take a deep breath and say, gee, I'm really a good person. I was kind to that little old lady. It's the simple acts, the simple kindnesses that you should really treasure every day because they're your virtues expressed. When you're kind to that person in your life who has constant chaos, you're kind to the person who falls off the wagon. That takes great courage. It takes so much more courage to be kind than to criticize.
And none of us are perfect, and we all get to learn and grow through our experiences here. And so it's wonderful to focus on the positive rather than negative because whatever we focus on does expand. Well, we're back to generating a positive attitude and focus, and I just even love shifting slides to see these beautiful pictures of these wonderful plants that are so helpful and helping us to generate a positive attitude. So we're looking at bergamot, lemon, basil, and geranium and how they work. So do you want to walk us through that?
Sure. If you think your attitude has, you have to go teach a class again to that group that had a lot of secret negative people in it. You want to boost yourself up with our friend bergamot, which is a hybrid citrus, which is extraordinary both neurologically and muscularly. And lemon, 4 drops of each. Then you want to add 3 drops of basil and 3 drops of geranium. You want to combine them, put them on your sternum, smell them, put them on one of those, what do you call those little terracotta things that you're going to wear it around your neck or keep it in your pocket so the fragrance is constantly emanating. Because the people around you will also benefit from this. The lean is toward seeking positive. And we know our limbic system is our strongest memory center. So when people smell wonderful, good fragrances, it conjures up positive memories. And in this case, when you're applying the oils, we want you to say, I trust myself to make good decisions for me. I can complete what I start. I love that. In fact, I think everybody, I would recommend if you have these oils right in your home right now, pull them out and try this just today or as soon as you're off the webinar, go ahead and grab those bergamot, lemon, basil, geranium, and start with trusting ourselves
to make good decisions. That will actually help you to trust yourself to make the good decision to think positively. Now, we can use things topically, aromatically, and internally. Do you want to walk us through the process of this? And then I'll tell my lemon and ginger story.
You got to tell your lemon and ginger story. Okay, we all know that we can use the oils topically. We can wipe them on. When we wipe them on, I think in terms of we're wiping off the half-dead cells that we don't need anymore. We're wiping away those blockages to our happiness. We're wiping away negative habits, things that haven't served us well. By breathing in the scent of the oils, whether it's diffused or, again, if it's on one of those magic little terracotta pieces, you're breathing in a choice of feeling good. Internal use for digesting thoughts that are hard to digest. People laugh at me all the time when I tell them I have a cocktail in the morning. I use lemon, ginger, and lime in the morning, a couple of drops of each, and I put that right in my water and I drink it down, and it gives my pancreas a jump start and my gallbladder, which is missing, I pretend it's still there, so that I can digest other people's sadness and help them see they have a choice. Tell us about your lemon ginger story.
Okay, so just so you all know, the teachers are the students and the students are the teachers, right? We all know that. And just because Dr. Sue and I work in this field and deal with this doesn't mean we don't end up all having our own issues and our own things we have to work through. And so I found myself over the weekend actually feeling very tired. I did feel like I might have a little bit of a virus or cough and congestion in my chest. And, of course, I was pulling out my On Guard and getting that going and everything, and I thought, let me scan myself. So I pulled out the Zyto scanner and scanned myself, and I actually scanned for ginger, melaleuca, elevation, and lemon. So when we got to this slide, as Dr. Sue and I were talking earlier, I said, tell me what that meant. Tell me what it meant. Now, of course, for me, I had my own interpretation of it, but I always loved to hear the doctors and hear what she had to say about that, and to look at what I was working on in my life. Now, I went right for the physical, thinking I might be catching a cold, and I could see the use of melaleuca and why that was there, and perhaps the ginger to maybe break up mucus, and lemon to cleanse things out and so forth, and elevation maybe just to lift my spirits in the moment. But Dr. Sue gave me some information I had not heard, so why don't you share with me your interpretation of my scan?
Well, my interpretation when you mentioned it was that what was happening with you was you were examining a belief that although it had served you on some levels very well, it felt like it had limited you in your healing ability. It had limited you in your ability to connect with your higher virtues and your higher aspects. And that you were using the melaleuca and the ginger to clear away the blockages so that you could understand the value of that belief, but help it mesh with your spiritual maturity.
So interesting, after she tells me that, I thought, you know what, that's exactly what happened, because I found myself while I was addressing a cold-type symptoms that night. I went to bed, and as I was waking up in the morning, it came to me a belief that I'd held for a very, very long time, and I knew it was time to let it go, and I actually felt that cleansing happen. So that, of course, all happened before I talked to Dr. Sue this morning, and she explained that, and I thought that's exactly what happened. And so this is just a validation of how well these essential oils work to not only address your physical needs, and I'm sure there was some truth to the melaleuca being useful and helping me fight off any germs or bacteria or colds or whatever that I was dealing with, and perhaps the ginger was breaking up mucus. But at the same time, this emotional process was going on in my body without even my realization of it. So this shows you that you can use this, that you can, without working in the field, being an expert, or even knowing, because I didn't have to have Dr. Sue explain that to me today, to have already had the benefit of having a belief come forward from the past and break itself up through the use of ginger and lemon, melaleuca, and elevation, that process that I needed. And you can intuitively listen to yourself too, even if you don't have a Zyto scanner. That's not always just the answer, but your own ability to be intuitive, to go to the resources, the books that are available to you. I love our book, Dr. Sue. I have been using it myself, going through the pages and looking at the blends that are available there, and much of what we're talking about today is right there for you in Living Healthy and Happily Ever After.
Yes,
well, let's move on.
I've been making up the blends for this coming Friday night for our adventure out on Long Island. And it's very exciting. Wait to see what's going to happen.
So fun. If you were in Salt Lake City with us, you will know what we're talking about when we were talking about blends. The energy is just fabulous when you blend these essential oils together, and what they can do is outstanding. Well, and I'm sure they'll help with affirmations. Our affirmations, just if you're not familiar with affirmations are positive statements that you can say to reset yourself. And when you say them out loud and your body actually hears your statements, particularly I statements, I am statements, you actually, your cells hear that information and listen. Now you may, make a statement like, I am successful. Let's pick something as an example. I am successful with money, or I'm good with money. Maybe you have a history of not being good with money, but you make the statement, I am successful financially. Money flows easily and effortlessly to me. If that's not happening in your life, you may actually hear your cells speak back to you something like, oh, that's not true. Why is she saying that? Your body, you can actually say to those cells, thank you so much for listening. However, this is the new information that we're giving you. I am successful with money. Money flows easily and effortlessly to me. My relationships work out for me. I am good enough. And you can make these statements out loud over and over again till your cells begin to understand that you are in charge of your body, you are in charge of your body-mind, and you're giving new information to these cells so that you can actually change the programming that exists in your body. I know affirmations work. I love them. They are like planting a new seed of thought in the ground and watching them to grow. Now, if you go and you plant that seed and make that affirmation and you say, I'm good enough and I love and accept myself and I'm worthy, and then you follow that up with a lot of negative self-talk, you're not feeding that seed. So we're not only asking you to plant the seeds of new thought, but we're asking you to feed the seeds of new thought with your essential oils and with staying positive throughout the day. I know, Dr. Sue, you love affirmations and you've used them for years and years. Do you want to share some of your experiences in therapy with them?
I can just tell you that if a person makes a commitment to themselves, they constantly restate it. They use a little wild orange. They use a few oils with it to make themselves happy, because that's the ultimate reason we ask you to do affirmations. You're going to find that space between stimulus and response, which is so freeing.
It is. And I want each of you to ask yourself this question right now. What would happen if I had loving thoughts toward myself and others most of the time? How might my world change? Now, sometimes we notice the thoughts that we have about ourselves, but maybe are we noticing the thoughts that we have about others when we're judgmental and hard on our husbands and our kids, and we may, even our coworkers at work, those thoughts actually can transmit to them in the form of energy and actually contribute to negative behavior. So we want to be looking at how we can actually manage our world by changing our thoughts and affecting others in that positive way. So ask yourself, how would your world change if you were to have loving thoughts towards yourself and others? And use this affirmation, I am the only voice in my head. I choose how I react to life, and change that voice. Now, there are oils for that. Dr. Sue, you want to share those?
Sandalwood, grapefruit, basil, 3 drops of each in your palm of your hands. Rub them together. Please put it in the back of your neck. Please put it on your sternum. The sandalwood holds the center vibration, which is the true essence of you within your heart. Grapefruit is the sharp raft that carries the basil, which is the message of new and the message of can do, because the grapefruit breaks up the obstacles, the collected mucus, the silly cells that need to move on, and basil renews and refreshes, especially if you make a clear statement of intent.
Love, love, love that tool. Last, we want to just talk about trusting yourself and using this affirmation that you do trust yourself. And let's say it out loud together. I trust that I can hear my
innermost thoughts
clearly. I own my thoughts. I think positively. I'd love for everyone who's watching the webinar right now to make that statement out loud. We'll say it again. I trust that I can hear my innermost thoughts clearly. I own my thoughts, and I think positively. Start moving yourself and trusting yourself to being confident that you can do this, that you can think positively. You know, the hardest part of any journey is taking that first step. I don't know about you, but when it comes to certain things in my life, I know that when I do them, they work, and then my habits lead me away from them. And when I take that first step, which is, again, always sometimes the hardest, and get back on track with my good habits, I can watch my world change. So let today be the day you start into a new habit of positive thinking, getting yourself back on a journey that will take you where you want to be. Lastly, we just want to give you a cover picture here of the book, if you don't have it, Living Healthy and Happily Ever After by Dr. Sue and myself. We encourage you to find a copy of that and pick it up and use it as a resource guide. There's lots of wonderful protocols and information. We've just barely scratched the surface today in Chapter 1 of how you can use this book to help you live healthy and happily ever after. We're right at an hour, and we can attempt some questions if you'd like. Dr. Sue, do you have any last final words before we do so?
Just enjoy your oils and trust yourself.
Love it. Love it, and I'm thankful for all of you who've joined us today. I hope this has been beneficial to you. We will give just a few minutes to see if any questions show up on the computer, and if not, we'll wrap up here.
What are we covering next week?
Yes, let's talk about that. Thank you. Next week we'll be talking about Chapter 2, and that is talking about belief systems. So we'll be going a little bit more into the family belief systems. We're talking about perceptions and beliefs and how they actually guide biology. So a little bit deeper in depth to some of the topics that we covered today. We're looking at that subconscious mind. So we hope you will join us. Again, this program will be held every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and then recorded and posted online. Looks like we do have a question here coming up. It says, let's see, we've got a few. Whoop. You'll have to give me just a second because I am new at using this particular program.
But we're quick studies. We are quick studies.
All right. DDR, question on the DDR. Wanting to know a little bit more about the DDR and exactly how it does help. Dr. Sue, do you want to take that?
The DDR is a very potent capsule. It also comes in an oil-based format. It's a new product from doTERRA, and basically the Reader's Digest condensed version is it works throughout your system to move out the lazy cells. And so when you move out the lazy cells, new healthy cells spring forward. We like new healthy cells, freshly oxygenated, freshly tagged, to come and do their job with an expectation of perfection, an expectation of success. The DDR is anti-carcinogenic. That means it has properties, when you use it consistently and drink water, will eliminate precancerous cells. It will eliminate gatherings of viruses like some types of rheumatoid arthritis. We're not supposed to say these things out loud, so you didn't hear it from us. But if you go to your back office, it has a complete scientific presentation, and I just gave you the condensed version. I take two times the day because I have to keep my body healthy to be around till I'm 132 when that hover bus takes me out when I'm standing in the middle of the street and forget where I am.
Love it. Okay, we have another question that says, how do we determine why we don't want to let go of certain beliefs or thoughts or feelings? And I'll take that for just a second, and then if you want to add on to that, Sue. Usually we hold on to things because we think a part of our subconscious thinks it works for us. And so that's the first thing that I would ask you to do. If you're holding on to something and you feel like you can't let go, you've got to say, how is this working for me and why? A lot of times our subconscious will actually think a certain thought or pattern gets us love or helps us to feel good about ourselves. So let's say we just can't get well. Let's say we're always sick and we can't get well. We may want to look at why we believe that being sick gets us love or helps us to feel good about ourselves. Often those are the two bottom line issues for our subconscious, is we think something gets us love or we think it gets us some sense of self-worth or self-being. And so we hold on. When we know we want to be loved more than we want anything else in the world, we know that we need to be loved. And we feel that at a very deep level. Consciously, we may know that we don't need to be loved by dirty, rotten scoundrels. We don't need them in our life, and we may get that consciously. But deep down, subconsciously, we may feel we can't survive without that love. We need to remember, though, the villains in our life who hurt us or abuse us usually don't have the ability to love and accept themselves, nor do they love and accept us very well. So we need to be able to let go of any illusions that holding on to things that don't work for us actually get us either love or self-acceptance. I don't know if you have any addition to add to that, Dr. Sue.
Just to change the words, but to say the exact same thing. Whatever patterns we repeat that do not serve us well are familiar. And the familiar, what you quoted earlier, the familiar devil we know is preferable to change. And that's why I'm always talking about courage, and that's why I love Roman chamomile. Roman chamomile can give you the courage to face your gifts and talents. It can give you the courage to do it. You can say over and over again, I can do this, I can finish this, I can have this, I want this, and you can be proud to say it.
That's fantastic. We have a question here for you, I think, Dr. Sue, and that is, do you have any oils or protocols for procrastination?
The motivation protocol. Yes. Our friend, we have black pepper. You want to mix black pepper with lime, frankincense, and wild orange. And you want to make that up, and you want to apply it to the backs of your knees, because when we're procrastinating, what are we doing? We're standing still. We're putting it off until we have to do it. So if you put it in the backs of your knees, it gets you moving forward. It also does funny things to your digestive system, so you have to pay attention instead of just, perform from habit. That's why I love that motivation group.
Love that. And a good question here, would we be using all these cocktails possibly daily or throughout the same day? The person asking the question says, I feel like all of the scenarios you mentioned apply to me. Where should I start, or just do it all?
Well, Rebecca, you and I have talked about this because a lot of people ask that. They write to us, and our response is pick one thing to work on consistently and honor that same thing day in and day out. Because if you recognize you have the power to be happy in changing one thing, everything else will catch up.
Exactly, and that applies to just a lot of habit changing as well. We talked about that last week too, Dr. Sue, just not taking on too much. You're not going to wake up one morning and exercise and give up white sugar and white flour and use your oils, all day long. And, too many habit changes set us up for failure. So we just want to pick one thing and get going on that. Just scanning through, we'll maybe do one more. How do we determine why we don't want to let go of certain things, thoughts, or feelings? We kind of covered that.
It also depends on who you hang out with. Like if your mother likes to complain about your brother, who's an alcoholic, God bless him, constantly, and she's making you feel uncomfortable with your secret relationship with your brother, then maybe you shouldn't talk with your mother anymore about your brother. You have to change something. Like you said earlier, if we repeat the same patterns over and over again, expect a different outcome, we're a little bit crazy too. So decide What makes you feel bad? What makes you feel good? I know this sounds simple, but it's not. I choose to do only what makes me feel good. If something makes me feel bad, I've got to examine, do I want to do this again?
So here's a good question. If you're on a limited budget, which essential oils should you buy to get started? What would you say on that?
I don't know. What would you say?
Well, I think it's individual. I don't know that we could say. I would say citrus oils in general are very inexpensive, and I would start with having at least one of them. I love the wild orange, love using that on a daily basis. The lime is also very inexpensive and fabulous to work with. I don't know how I could live without my buddy frankincense, but frankincense is not one for a low budget. What would you say, Dr. Sue? What were your choices?
I would find 5 friends who all can benefit from oils, from good shampoo, from good toothpaste, from the full range of products doTERRA has, have a party, sponsor everybody, and order everything I want.
I love that answer.
And hold the place. People. So then we book a date, we have a party, they earn their oils, they're already starting their change because they had the courage to clean all the junk off their living room chairs so they could have their friends in.
Well, you can always use the affirmation that money flows easily and effortlessly to me. And one wonderful thing about doTERRA's compensation plan is it does allow for people to make some money right off the bat. So you can get some good fast start bonuses to buy what you need. And use those points, too. This is a great month to enroll in doTERRA. Okay, one last question. We'll take it, and that is just Mitomax ? How is Mitomax helpful?
Well, I love the takeaway sale that Rob Young did. He said this is really for athletes and for people who want to develop more stamina and have energy during the day. And we all groaned, and I raised 2 hands and said, what's the max amount I can take? I want more stamina. I want more energy. I love it. I started with 1 in the morning, and then, because it says you can take 2 twice a day. I take 1 in the morning, and if I'm going to have a long day, like if I'm doing a post-surgical procedure or I got 4 warms-ups before surgery, I'll take 2 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon. They are amazing. They have a lot of the properties of the CRS, plus they have life-giving quality for our cells that are water-soluble, so you can't overuse it. But as you use it day after day, and I've got some of the doctors using them now, their low back pain is disappearing, and that's the only change they've made. They've added this to the Vitality Pack. It not only gives you energy, it sustains life, which means when you're making new cells, you're making better cells today than you did a week ago.
Well, and anytime you have more energy, you're going to be more apt to think more positive thoughts. So it's it's going to have its domino effect. Well, I said no more questions, and then there's one on here I'm passionate about, so I have to answer it.
Well, go.
And that is, how do you do all this with teens? How do you help them to reprogram their thoughts? I have a house full of teenagers, and I will just quickly answer that and say it starts with yourself. Anytime you want to change the world around you, start with you. When a mother or a parent changes their focus in the home, then it naturally teaches through nonverbal communication. It helps your family members and your children to learn new ways to do things. So always start with yourself. Well, thank you so much again for joining us for our webinar. Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life. We hope you have wonderful thoughts this week. We look forward to seeing you next week on our program, Tuesdays at 2 with Rebecca and Dr. Sue, to talk about beliefs and how beliefs control or manage biology. We'll see you soon. Thanks so much for joining us. Bye-bye.
And thank you, guys. Keep opening those bottles.